I've been planning to get to this lesson for a month or more, and we just never got as far as I planned to. But this is the lesson. It's all about clothes. We saw last week that everything bad came about as a result of Eve's sin. Y'all aren't listening. Wasn't Eve's sin. We spent quite a bit of time on that. It was Adam's sin, not Eve. Eve was deceived. Adam willfully chose, which brought about the curse that we looked at last week. And we saw that every bad thing that exists was brought about by the curse as a result of their sin. I've listed, rich, poor, educated, uneducated, good looking, and I had ugly, and I thought, oh, that doesn't sound good. So I put good looking and not so good looking. Men, women, boys, girls, animals, trees, grass, everything on earth has suffered because of the curse that God put on the serpent, on Eve, and then on Adam. Sickness, disease, and death all came about as a result of sin. I told you, I believe it was last week, maybe, in all of the years that I've dealt at the hospital, with the police, all the years that I did death notifications, all of the years I worked with families in the hospital in Texas, all the years that I have worked with sickness and death, the number one question I was asked in Texas and then up here is, why did God take my fill in the blank? My parent, my child, my husband, my wife, my brother, my sister, Why did God take my loved one? And I always, well, not always, but once Answers in Genesis gave me some correct answers. I tried to explain to people, God created everything good. God did not create sickness. God did not create death. God did not create fractured legs. God did not create dislocated shoulders. Had a salesman drop by last week. He went to work for another company, so I stayed with the company he used to work with, but we became good friends, and so he just stopped by to say hi. He's not allowed to approach me to buy, but he can stop by as a friend, and he's probably in his early 40s, maybe, young man, and he just had complete knee replacement at that age. And it's like, wow, why do we have to have knee replacements? Why do we have to have shoulder replacements? Why do we have to have our wrist held together with pins and plates? Why do we have to do those things? Not because God isn't love, not because God doesn't care, but God simply allows the natural consequences of sin to take their place. You are the youngest you will ever be the moment you're born. You will never be any younger. From the moment you're born, you start to die. Now, I've already lived past 70. I'm already well past that. But I know, and I've known since I was a kid, the day's going to come when I'm going to die. Not because God doesn't love me, but it's because I was born with a sinful nature. And then as I got older, I chose sin, like I preached Sunday morning. I chose sin, and I'm going to die as the natural consequences of sin. Now, one result of that sin, and I've got a few scriptures here. Chapter 2, verse 25. We saw right after they were created, we looked at this very briefly, but right after they were created, 2:25, Genesis, they were both naked, the man and his wife. Thousand comedians out of work, and he's trying to be funny. What can I say? He's my stand-up comedian, in case you didn't notice. There was no need for clothes. They were husband and wife. They were perfect. They did not have warped opinions. And so there was no shame in their bodies that God had made them. There was no shame until we get to chapter. I've already covered that. There was no shame in chapter 3, verse 7. Now the eyes of them both were opened because they ate of the forbidden fruit, and they knew that they were naked. Once sin entered the picture, now all of a sudden they look at each other and there is a shame associated now with their nakedness that was not there when they were perfect. Now they are ashamed naturally. They are ashamed without God having to come along and say, shame on you. Nobody told them anything. But once sin entered the world, they knew instinctively that nakedness was wrong. They knew it. They knew that it had a bad connotation, and so they did the best they could. They took fig leaves and made themselves aprons to cover their body. I was thinking as I was going over and over and over the lesson, I remember when our daughter was born. Daddy is never as good as giving baths as mommies are. Mommies, just boys, girls, mamas give better baths than we men do. So, but when she was young, Kathy was working part-time, and so I would sometimes have to change her diapers. I would have to feed her food that Kathy had already prepared. I would have to, give her baths sometimes. But there came a point, and nobody said a word to our daughter. Nobody said anything. But there came a point, and I don't remember how old she was. She was still quite young. But there came a point where, without anybody saying anything, instinctively, it's like, Dad, can Mom give me my bath tonight? From that day forward, I never changed her diapers, never gave her a bath. She reached a point without saying anything. She instinctively knew that, okay, it's time, Dad, that you back off. And from that day forward, I never changed her, bathed her, never did anything. because she intuitively knew nakedness is not something that you share with everybody. I don't know if anybody else had that, but I well remember it. You don't, because you were working, but I well remember it. There come a point where instinctively there's some shame associated here, and I don't want you in part of it. So they made the best clothes they could. In verse 10, chapter 3, Adam said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid. Sin brings about fear. Because I was naked, and I hid myself. In verse 11, God asked, who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? The only way you would know you were naked is if you disobeyed my word and sinned. You would not know you were naked were it not for the fact that you sinned. In verse 21, an innocent animal. Many people picture it as a sheep. Bible doesn't say what it was. It's like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Many people picture it as an apple tree, soured apples, I'm sure. Some think it's a persimmon tree if you eat it green. You ever eaten a green persimmon? Oh, gross. Bible doesn't tell us what kind of tree it was, but it was a tree that God said, don't eat. It could have been grapefruits, could have been oranges, could have been, pears. It could have been almost anything. It wasn't what kind of fruit it was. What made that tree sin is the fact God said, don't eat it. That made it, that tree, sin. All right, so they made clothes out of fig leaves. Now, we have archaeological evidence that, and of course, evolutionists say billions and millions of years ago, but they have found palm trees that were up to 6 feet wide and about 6 to 8 feet long. Before the flood, before the flood, there were no direct sun. Before the flood, there were no sun rays. Methuselah lived, 969 years. Almost every one of them lived to be over 900. If plants lived that long, you can get an idea of how big in 900 years a plant could grow. When we bought our house a couple of years ago, I don't know what those things are called. Kathy could probably tell you. But they planted them right by our front door, right by the steps, where we go down the steps on the front door. My mom used to raise those things, and I hated them then, and I still hated them. But every year, they started off little bitty, and by the time we cut them down this year, they were so big, they were sticking through and just about blocking the sidewalk, where you go down the steps. They were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Picture that was only 3 years of growth. Picture 900 plus years of growth. Plants could, whatever it was, it's called a fig leaf, but it could be what we think of figs may not be what was figs back in that day. They sewed them together with their brand new sewing machine. They sewed them together because they knew that they were naked. They wanted to cover up their nakedness because of their sin. Now, question I get asked Well, people finally quit asking me because nobody liked my answer. So I've not been asked now in a while. But what is considered naked? And I spent hours looking different things up, going through a dozen Bible dictionaries, looking up Bible encyclopedias, looking up verses of Scripture. And I laugh when I read that first one. My grandparents' generation thought if a lady's ankle, if your ankle is showing, you're naked. You're indecent. You need to go get some clothes on. I remember oh, I do. Above the ankle. Yes, thank you. Anything above the ankle. Boy, that's a big difference. I remember my great uncle. We were at his house one time, and my aunt, by the way, I'm named after that great uncle, Uncle Wilbert. My aunt came out, and her dress somehow had gotten caught. And I don't know, I'm only about 2 or 3 years old. Well, I was older than that because I remember it. But her ankle, her dress was caught, and just her ankle was showing. And Uncle Wilbert chewed her out, told her to get back in the house and don't come out till you're decent. Obviously, we don't consider the ankle to be the limit. You know, I was asked a question many years ago, how high can you go without being indecent? My great uncle said it was the ankle. Obviously, we don't hold quite to that today. Some people see nothing wrong with total nudity. When we were in Australia, we were in a very nice motel. I did not see it. Others did and told me, and that was all I needed to know. But there was one particular beach down, I don't even know how far it was, but it was somewhere out from our motel where you could go with practically no clothes on and be perfectly accepted. Once I knew that beach was there, I always stayed in the opposite side of the hotel or motel. But they thought that was perfectly normal. Nothing wrong with that. I think most of us would disagree with that idea. Some consider covering only, and I tried to figure out how to say this discreetly, but some consider covering only the most basic body parts as decent. As long as you've got the most very basic body parts covered, they consider you decent. Actually, that would probably be the majority today, or at least a very, very large percentage. What is considered naked or indecent? And this is where I picked out 3, but I read many more. The International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, or ISBE as it's often referred to, define naked as the portion of the leg from the knee to the hip as being naked. Now you know why nobody likes me when I tell them what I understand. The Complete Expository Dictionary defines it as scantily or poorly clad. Okay, that's open for discussion. What is considered scantily or poorly clad? Vine's dictionary, which is a very popular Bible dictionary, said it is to be clad in the undergarment only, the outer being laid aside. Now that one went into the robe and, all the different layers that they wore back in that day. But naked, and there's many references in the Bible, is where they take off the outer garments and expose and have nothing but the undergarment. They considered that naked. I remember my brother, when he was in Texas, had a lady in his church who decided to argue with him one day. That was her first mistake. She said, "There's nothing wrong with me wearing a bikini to the beach." And my brother asked her, he said, "Would you wear your underwear to the beach?" "Why, of course not." "Then what does your bikini cover that your underwear doesn't?" In fact, your bikini covered less than your underwear. Yeah, case closed. End of story. So does the Bible give any clue? And I spent not hours, but long time going through many verses of Scripture. Exodus 20:26, talking about the priest. When they would go, up the stairs into the upper parts of not the Holy of Holies, but there were rooms and things built onto the side. "Neither shalt thou go up by steps," not steps up, but they could go around in steps where it would be ground. You'd go up ground. They would fill in the ground and make steps going up circular to the upstairs apartments. "Neither shalt thou go up by steps into mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered." Doesn't define it. Isaiah chapter 47, "Take the millstones and grind meal." Now this is talking about when Israel is going to be punished and sent into captivity. So Isaiah is prophesying that they are going to go into captivity. "Take the millstones and grind meal. Uncover thy locks. Make bare the leg." That's part of their punishment, making bare the leg. "Uncover the thigh." Now, help me out. I never was very good in biometrics. I just kind of made that word up. This is your thigh, right? Right here. This is your thigh. Yeah. If I remember my high school health, your thigh, well, let's go ahead and read Samuel. "Wherefore Hanun, who was the king of one of the other countries," David had been real good friends with Hanun's dad. Hanun's dad died, and David sent ambassadors over to show his sympathy to Hanun in the loss of his father. When they got there, Hanun's advisors said, "Don't you believe they came to show sympathy? They came to spy out the land so they could capture us." And so in order to show them up and to show David, "Don't you send ambassadors to scout the land to capture it," he did the worst thing he could think of to make sure they got the message. He took David's servants, shaved off the one half of their beards. And by the way, David told them to stay in private quarters until their beard grew back. So he cut off their beard, which for a Jew was one of the worst things you could do. they took great pride in their beards. And if you cut off one half of it, they would be totally embarrassed. And it said he cut off half their beards, cut off their garments in the middle, even to the buttocks, and sent them away. Now, the buttocks, as I understand it, is your hips. So he cut their garments off up to their hips to embarrass them, to shame them, and to make them to where David got the message, don't mess with us. But notice he cut off their garments up to their buttocks to embarrass them, to humiliate them, and to make the worst possible shame that he could think of. Now, we don't have this problem to my knowledge. Okay. But I see people coming out of churches. I saw a lady the other day. I wasn't looking. I was doing my business. She walked right in front of me. Her blouse was longer than her shorts. And I thought, lady, please get out of my way. She thought she was fine. She was perfectly fine. But, the make bare the leg, uncover the thighs, pass over the rivers, back in Isaiah again, thy nakedness shall be uncovered, yea, thy shame shall be seen. What was their shame? Making bare the leg and uncovering the thigh was their shame. And they were exposed. All right, now that is over with. I can go back to something I enjoy much worse. But God clothed them because the body is created in God's image. The body was made in God's image. And because of sin, God had to cover up His image. Because His image, the Adam no longer bore the image of God the way he had before. All right, ladies, what time tomorrow? 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock tomorrow. Ladies, cleaning, Saturday. Saturday is free. I'm sorry. Oh yes, Bryan Station's conference started tonight. And it'll go all day Thursday and all day Friday. So if you get a chance to go to Bryan Station, I'm planning to go at least one day. I'm going to try to go 2 if I can, but definitely if I don't make it tomorrow, I definitely want to make it by Friday. So if you want to go, you're more than welcome to ride down with me. If you don't know where it is, you can't find it. If you don't know where it is, you can't get there. Well, if you got a real good GPS, you might. But every time I follow my GPS, Casey was with me one time, and I followed my GPS, and we went through roads and turned and turned and turned. Had we gone the way I knew, it was a straight shot, but it took us through subdivisions and, took us 3 times longer to get there, but we did eventually